Welcome to Bravo Team, our second G.I. Joe show looking at all the secondary G.I. Joe material. I am your host, Aaron Moss, codenamed Brotherhead. On this show, I'll either be by myself or have other guest hosts joining me, looking at all the G.I. Joe material out there. We'll be covering things like the toys, the Action Force comic, the European Missions comic, the movies, G.I. Joe Renegades, or anything else that is not G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero comic, or the 80s cartoon. Come, join us on our mission to stop Cobra from taking over the world. Yo, Joe. Hey, Joes. Brother Ed here, and welcome to episode 68 of Bravo Team. 68? No, 38. Sorry about that. Episode 38 of Bravo Team. I'm trying something a little different this time out. StreamYard's getting a little expensive for me, so I'm trying out some other software, some other products. I'm trying, this is called Restream I'm using it, and I should be streaming it to YouTube like normal. So please bear with me as I'm getting used to it. Before I introduce my co-host today, I do want to mention that in the chat, we do have our good friend, Joseph Jackson. Hey, Joe. Glad you could join us, man. Thank you for coming to the show. And again, he says, Cobra! And also joining us is Heinz Koch. Thanks for joining us, Heinz. And again, I see if you guys ever want to appear on the show, as an actual guest, hit me up, let me know. I can definitely, wouldn't mind having you guys on. Let me know what episode you guys want to be on or whatever. Reach out to me. But I am not alone today. I'm alone right now, but I'm going to bring in my co-host today.
Good day, welcome to the Great White North.
Because celluloid heroes never feel any pain, and celluloid heroes never really die.
Check out the big brain on Brad. You're smart enough.
There we are. Brad Abraham. Hey, Brad.
Hey, Aaron. I gotta say, I think that intro could be a little longer.
Could it? Well, I'll work on that.
Well, you should play like the full national anthem, "O Canada," and then you should follow that with the complete Tom Sawyer by Rush. And then maybe close it out with the SCTV theme. But, those are just suggestions. You can use one or you can use all of them like you did with that intro. I don't think you could decide. It's like, is it going to be Sam Jackson saying what a big brain I got?
Yeah,
is it going to be Bob and Doug? Is it going to be the Celluloid Heroes song? Is it going to be Blame Canada? You just thought, I'm just going to throw all of it in. They all kind of apply. But
yes, I could not figure out. As I put that together, I'm like, I like this, but I like God bless it, I can't figure out. I'm gonna put it on there for now, and I'll edit down to a smaller thing later on, maybe.
Well, I am flattered as always, and always I'm glad to be here talking G.I. Joe. It's issue 30, episode 38.
Yes, episode 38 of Bravo Team.
I'm sure it sometimes feels like it was 68 episodes, but it's only been 38 so far. The other one's been going longer.
Yeah, the other one we just recorded 69, so that's where I was
nice. So
yeah, 69.
69, dudes!
So,
nice.
And again, we are looking at Special Missions number 9. Again, I am reading it in the online digitally, and I've also got the compendium, issue 2. In fact, issue 3 of the compendium is now out to buy. I'm looking at in-stock trades. I'm debating on, they have a cover like this one, or they also have issue, I think it's 93, the Snake Eyes, where his face like half wrapped, as the other cover.
Let me just mention, it's my son's the end of his April break in Massachusetts. They get a week off in February and then a week off in April. And a week off at Christmas, so it all evens out. But we were in New York City, and on Tuesday night, he and I went to Midtown Comics, which is the comic book shop of choice there for me, at least when I lived in New York. And they had just put out like the next day's comics on like the top shelf, and it was like a security operation. They had like tape over it, and it's like you cannot purchase these until tomorrow. You can't even look at them. But wow. I saw that one of the newest G.I. Joe compendium was up there.
Very nice. Yeah, so I'm just debating on which one I want to buy, because again, much like with your intro, it's hard for me to decide which one to go with.
Well, when there's such a bounty of things to choose from. I picked up the GI Joe classified scrap iron figure.
Oh, okay, very nice.
On my trip, I determined to buy a souvenir that uniquely said New York instead of buying another GI Joe figure. But do you have that one? Scrap iron? Do you have scrap iron?
Yes. Oh, yes, I do. He's up here on the shelf
with all the explosion effects. They did a really good job on him. Although my son, who's a big Godzilla fan, saw the explosion effects. He's like, "Do you need those?" And I was like, "No." And he took them all. And he set up one of his Godzilla figures on his windowsill.
Very nice.
Light explosions going off around him. So I said, "Hey,
I've got him up there. He's back on the shelf, back by Zorana.
Yeah. See, I don't have Zorana. And, I have a bias against characters whose names begin with Z.
I've noticed that, so it's all right.
I'm not sure if it was obvious enough.
Not quite. In fact, that may be your next email address I introduce. Oh.
I have. We know about this. I have mellowed on Zartan.
Yes, you have.
I purchased him in classified, and that was the turning point. And frankly, I mean, talking to you and Jared and Kevin and the other regulars on the Headcast streams, it's like I've come around on Zartan somewhat because yes, he's kind of weird. Well, he's this weird, goofy kind of chameleon man, but at the same time, it's that kind of that goofiness, that silliness that kind of plucks G.I. Joe out of the real world and into more of a fantasy world, which I know Jared, our military veteran, has spoken of numerous occasions that he likes the goofy aspects of G.I. Joe, having seen combat himself, and it's not fun; it's terrifying, and he can groove to Zartan and Raptor and everything, which is interesting because I guess we should start talking about this issue at some point. Issues. This issue of Special Missions #9, which I got the original issue here with me because I'm special and fancy. It's kind of turning transparent on your screen, but this is very much a real world G.I. Joe kind of story. So it's after all that talk of Zartan and Raptor and stuff like that, it's this is the groin pull part of G.I. Joe. Where you go? Okay, into the Middle East, into Afghanistan.
We were supposed to have David Finn was supposed to show up, but again, it's bright early in the morning for him, so he may not be awake yet. And I know Kevin's traveling the world, going to Las Vegas and Los Angeles for this weekend. And Jared, speaking of which, has another show today, so another podcast he's working on. So
you're all stuck with me.
So I'm stuck with just you. So that's all right. Like I said, I enjoy having you on. You got a lot of great insights, and I enjoy talking to you, man. So it should be a cozy little one-on-one show today. So let's go and get into it. So this is, as I said, Special Missions #9. The cover date on this was February of 1988. The on-sale date, October the 6th, 1987. Price, $1. The title of this was called Plausible Denial. Written, as usual, by Larry Hama. Artist, Herb Trimpe. Letterer, Philip Hugh Felix. Colorist, Bob Sharan. Editor, Bob Harris. The cover was done by Dave Cockrum. I think I've heard that guy from somewhere. Oh, and inker was Bob McLeod. So let's go and look at the cover. Like I said, I'm having a problem pulling the cover up on my screen, so we'll just have to go.
I'll just hold it up.
So again, we got a helicopter shooting at some guys here on the ground. The guys, one has a rifle of some sort, the other has like a rocket launcher as they're getting ready to take shot at each other. No Joe's in sight that we can see. We got a nice blue background. We got the rock walls letting us know it's probably in the Middle East. Nice little explosion in the background. Let's get some thoughts on this. Brad, what do you think about this cover?
Well, this cover, kind of like this issue, hits what I call Brad's sweet spot. Not meant to be dirty or disgusting or anything like that. Meaning there's no Craptor, there's no Crotchmaster, there's no Toe Jammer Xanax, no Dr. Brainfart, no Cobra either, for the matter, on the cover, which is a way of saying this is a Special Missions cover. They're never the most iconic or, dare I say, memorable covers, like some of the most memorable G.I. Joe mainline covers are, but they always give you a good taste of what's inside. And in this case, quite literally so. Slight spoiler alert. If you turn the page to the first page, or turn the cover to the first page of the book, the splash page, you've got two Russian gunships, Hind D's, coming in. So it's like the cover is the reverse angle of the first image on the in the book itself. And by page 2, the rocket launchers have gone out and the helicopters have gone down. So, I mean, Special Missions always gives great action-based covers. And, in the case of this one, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. The first is I'm really taken by the use of color in it. There's this great explosion happening in the background as the Hind D comes in. There's this nice blue sky framed by the desert canyon walls. Most notably, though, for this cover is there are no G.I. Joe team members present. Unless you could argue maybe the guy with the rocket launcher and the head covering is one of our Joes, in Mufti, I guess as they call it. But no G.I. Joe team members being present rarely happens in this book and in the main book as well. And you could argue that there's nothing terribly evocative of the cover, but that's kind of Special Missions thing. Like I said, they're kind of great meat and potatoes stories and meat and potatoes covers. But it wasn't until you pointed it out, and I was just looking at the art credit that Dave Cockrum. I mean, I currently have been reading through the Claremont Cockrum run of Uncanny X-Men from the 80s.
Yes.
They put out these sort of collected editions of them, slowly going through. But I just got through ones that are covering era of X-Men that I remember. I was never an X-Men reader, but a lot of kids in my 6th grade class were big X-Men. So some of them just during recess would hand me the book to read, and I kind of go through it and everything. So we're kind of in like the 1985, 1986 era of X-Men, which is quite fun as well. So I mean, Dave Cockrum, great artist.
Oh yeah, very much so. And yeah, like you say, I enjoyed this cover. It was very much. It's a scene out of the book, basically. It's I think it's probably between pages 1 and 2, or close up there at the top of page 2. Very much so. So, and like we've talked about, usually you have 3 different type of covers we see usually. Either something like this, it's a page out of the book. Something like issue, 53? Not 53, 43. Kevin really likes Death on it. That's kind of a representation of the issue. And then you get your third one, which is just basically just whatever stock art they have in hand just to throw on the cover. And I prefer ones like this where it's actually a scene from the book or an in-between panel, something that's actually happening in the book. I prefer those normally. Though again, that issue 43 is fantastic. But yeah, I normally tend to prefer something that's from the book. And it's got very action-oriented. Like you're saying, that nice explosion in the background, rolling up the fire. We got the jet, the helicopter firing, shooting at us, tearing up the ground. The use of color on this, as you said, is fantastic. We got the blue background with the brown rock walls on the side, and we get these 2 fighters down here on the ground just taking on the jet or the helicopter. Very nice, beautiful cover. So out of 1 to 5 Yo-Jo Colas, for those at home, again, 1 means it's horrible, 3 is an average, and 5 is something you want to hang on the wall. How many Yo-Jo Colas do you give this?
You know what? I would ordinarily give it a 3. And, 3 is my standard rating for most things. It is perfectly respectable, 3.
Yes.
I'm going to knock this up to a 3.5 because of Dave Cochrum's art.
Very nice.
On it, because the man is a legend, justifiably so. And it's just kind of cool that, one of the premier X-Men artists did a cover for a G.I. Joe comic.
Yes.
I'm wondering which other ones he did, but,
Yeah, like you say, Dave Cockrum, he is a legend. He is one of the, especially for this era, the 80s era of X-Men, he was a big, very much well known for doing that. So, and as far as my rating on this, I'm going to agree with you. I was between a 3 and a 4. It's not one that I really remember when I'm thinking about it, but as I'm looking at it, and as we've talked about, it's a great job on it. So yeah, I got 3.5 is a very respectable number for this.
It's funny when you think of the covers, sounds like we're being down on this by saying, the Special Missions covers, they're not the most memorable and they're not the most exciting. They're not the most iconic. And it's you're kind of like that vinyl enthusiast record collector. They say, it's not about the cover, man. It's not about the sleeve. It's about the music inside the sleeve. It's yes, that's a kind of a lame album cover, but the music inside is so great. You kind of forgive it, I don't think any of the Special Missions covers would win an award for best cover, but the stories in them, as far as G.I. Joe stories go, like we've said before in talking about this book, that there's some of the best Joe cover or best Joe stories that we've had during this particular run.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like we say, like you've been one of these that's mentioned it a lot. Also, is that these special mission stories are very much reminiscent of the more early GI Joe stuff. If you don't care for the more fantastical elements, Dr. Mindbender, Serpentor, Zartan, the twins, and all that, these stories for the most part is very much in that sweet spot, I think. Because again, like we've talked about, we think that Special Missions was kind of a bone that Marvel threw at Larry to get him to do all these other more goofier characters that I personally love. But I can see how someone that's not has the same mindset I do may not care for him, or at least in your military comics. Nothing wrong. I will give Brad crap about it just because he's a friend and that's what we do. But no, honestly, I respect his decision on that, and again, it's not like he's hating on him for no reason. Again, I will admit that, they are a very goofy bunch for the most part.
I like to say, I never hate on these things for no reason. There's always a reason for hating.
Well, some people hate on things for no reason.
It's not hatred. Yeah. And, G.I. Joe is a very big tent. And the great thing about G.I. Joe over the past 45 years, as I clear my throat again, and is throughout all its different iterations, like from the original series to a comic series to the early 2000s relaunch, and the things like Chuckles, The Last Laugh, and Cobra Civil War and stuff like that. There's enough in there that you're going to find a version of G.I. Joe that you like. You may like the really hard military type of thing. You might like the more fantastical stuff. I'm sure there are fans who came to it out of watching the live action movies as well. They're probably at the right age and said, that's awesome. I'm going to learn more about G.I. Joe, and started reading the comics and went, oh, these are really good. So, there's plenty for everybody. There is a flavor of G.I. Joe out there for every person.
Yes, very much so. And I was looking up while we were talking, and apparently Cockrum was done with X-Men by this point.
Yeah.
Looks like his last Uncanny X-Men was issue 164 in 1982. He did like an X-Men special, and he's done some other X-Men books here and there, Nightcrawler and things like that. But he was pretty much done with the main X-Men title for now. And he's only did one other cover, G.I. Joe Special Missions 24. Was the other cover.
We'll get to.
Yes, which I was curious what other covers you may have done for G.I. Joe. So you just did the two covers, it looks like, according to Mike's Amazing World. This one in issue 24. So,
well, now I know.
And then knowing he's half the battle.
Yeah, that's right. Set up and pay off. A pitch.
Anyway, so you set him up, I knock him out of the park. So, we get a 3.5. So respectable. Again, anyone out in the chat, if you guys want to give your own ratings or thoughts on it, feel free, and I can read it on the air. But let's go and get some thoughts on this issue. Actually, first, before we get to the thoughts, let me read the synopsis. That might help. Falcon, Psych Out, and Slipstream go on a covert mission to Afghanistan to trick 3 Russian prisoners into freeing an American captive. But the Russians turn the table on the Joes, as not only do they free the captive, but they also include a bunch of refugees, which allows the Russians to slip out of the country in the other direction. So it's a very simple story, but there's a lot going on in it. Brad, do you have thoughts on this issue?
I have thoughts. I have many thoughts.
Share those thoughts.
Well, this is another one of Brad's sweet spots. Again, not in a dirty, disgusting way. Just in because if you're a longtime reader of this book, like I am, like you are, once we get into this story, once we start rolling it, and I remember this back in the day when I started reading it, page 3, all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, it's those guys, the Mujahideen guy and the CIA guy from the really great 2-parter that introduced us to the October Guard in the mix. This was issues 6 and 7, or as my Gen Alpha son would call it, 6, 7. And I love having these guys back in this story because it really gives us a nice little continuity, particularly within that first year of the comic. You said before that we've all kind of agreed that with Larry writing and Herb Trimpe, for the most part, illustrating every Special Missions issue, it's almost like stories that harken back to the first year or so of the G.I. Joe comic. We have gone a long haul between October Guard appearances, between issues 6 and 7, and then the first or the second annual, I guess, and or the second yearbook. And similarly, in this book, they even reference that it's been about 5 years since the CIA guy came to Afghanistan and was embedded with this tribe of freedom fighters. But just for me, the idea that these freedom fighters, these rebels, whatever you want to call them, have been fighting the Soviets all this time in the background, while the mainline book has just been chugging along and dealing with brainwave scanners and Zartan and Serpantless and bats. And the more fantastical elements of G.I. Joe is a neat little callback. It kind of gives life to these supporting characters who cross paths with the G.I. Joe team. And it was also interesting to me in a way that these Joes who were featured in the story, which is Psych Out, Falcon, Lieutenant Falcon, and Slipstream, none of them are the original Joes who cross paths with these guys in those earlier issues. So, on this sort of the story between the story, or reading between the lines, what must the CIA guy, and I think it's Ahmed, is the guy who leads the tribe, must be thinking, and say, well, here's the same team, here's completely different people though from last time. So, the more things change, more things stay the same in that kind of way. And again, I have to hand it to Larry for making Psych Out a much cooler character than his action figure might have indicated. He was kind of like this lime green and gray figure with these little radar dishes or strapped to his wrists and everything like that, and using psychological warfare to freak people out. But, I think he did a good job on, at least in this issue, but also there was a previous Special Missions issue. And I think even when he popped up in the mainline book, it's very much him as a thinker and a master of dissecting the psyches of the enemy and predicting what he thinks they're going to do next or what they're likely to do based on these different criteria, which is a clever little bit of storytelling, and it kind of plants him as more of a formidable Joe. I mean, he can get away with the goofy costume because as soon as you show up, he's probably got a read on who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are.
I was just say that the actual character is not as goofy as the figure makes him appear.
Yeah, which is funny. I'm curious to see what direction the inevitable classified series figure goes in, because I think they've named him as an upcoming figure, but they haven't shown what he's going to look like. And they'll probably toe the line between, okay, he kind of looks like his original version, but there's some variety, so he doesn't look quite as silly. But I think just as a slight diversion, the classified line has really done a good job of making the goofier looking Joes and Cobras look a lot better than their previous incarnations. I'm not no slick or stick to Raptor, but he got a big blow up, and so did Crystal Ball, another silly one that actually looks like one of the better classified figures. And even Sci-Fi, the lime green laser trooper, looks pretty good as well. I saw him on the shelf at the comic shop in New York as well. And I looked at it and said, it's pretty cool. I'm not going to get them because I don't have any room for these guys anymore, but not with scrap iron on my shelf now. But that's sort of grand overview here stuff. But I wanted to give some mentions to, as always, the art. Again, I've made my admiration for Herb Trimpe known far and wide, not just here. I stand in the street corners and I yell that Herb Trimpe is one of the great comic book artists. He should be respected and should be celebrated. But I think because it's Trimpe illustrating this issue, and he illustrated the earlier one that these side characters are introduced in right well, it feels very much like a piece of the same tale. Like you could read the first 10 or so issues of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, and then jump into Special Missions. And aside from the fact that there's some newer Joes introduced in the stories, it would just feel like there was no transitional time at all. But, back in the day, reading this and seeing those familiar faces kind of prompted me to dig up those issues and read them again, just to kind of remind myself of what was going on. But looking at the artwork in the splash page, you got this great sort of behind the helicopters as they're attacking the rebels. And you see the shell casings flying out of the machine guns, and you see them moving in on the guys running and everything like that. And, he draws hardware, I think, really well, not in a completely accurate, 100% accurate sort of way, but in a way that's evocative of what these pieces of hardware look like. And on page 8, when they're going to be going over the Hindu Kush in an Antique, which is a Ju-52 propeller-driven plane from the Second World War. In his biography, in Herb Trimpe's biography, that after he was an illustrator, or concurrent when he was an illustrator, because the vagaries of the comic industry meant there'd be times when he would be going without work, is he was a licensed airplane mechanic. So he spent a lot of time in and around airplanes north of New York at the airports, I think in Poughkeepsie. And so, anytime there's any kind of aircraft in a G.I. Joe story illustrated by Herb Trimpe, he really brings it a degree of realism that you wouldn't normally expect. Like, it's a specific aircraft, it's a specific make, it's a specific model, and he clearly did his research just to make sure everything, even from the hatching on the fuselage and the wings, these vertical or I guess horizontal lines, are very much a feature of that aircraft. And on page 9, if I can get really specific, it's not really commented on. This is they're getting the plane started, and Falcon says, "Somebody stand by with a fire extinguisher for engine starting procedure." And it's not commented on or explained why. We just have to kind of infer that this plane is so old. There's all these checks you have to go through. You fire up the engine, and as soon as the motors start turning and the propellers start turning, you have to fire up stand in front of it with a fire extinguisher and let the foam go just to keep the thing from catching on fire because it's so old. And I think that's one of those things that only an airplane mechanic would ever think of. And I'm sure he told Larry that as well. And they may have conferred a bit on the writing of the issue itself, as well. Larry certainly knows his military history, and his military experience certainly indicates as much. He may not know as much about these old aircraft, and you kind of like to think of him saying, "I'm going to write an old aircraft into this just so Herb can draw it, and maybe he'll give me some other information I didn't know about these things." So that's probably my favorite little bit from the issue. Which overall, like I said, there's not a lot that happens in it, but it's sort of like the way it happens more so than what happens, how they kind of manipulate the Russians into impersonating the GI Joe team, and then sending them in to rescue this kidnapped businessman. And as soon as they part ways, the Russians are like, "Oh, these foolish Americans with their terrible Russian accents think they've got us fooled. We're going to do things differently." And meanwhile, Psych Out is, well, they probably know we're not who we say we are. They're probably going to try this. So let's move to this rendezvous point and see if they show up on schedule, which of course they do. So it's like the Russians thinking they're outmaneuvering the GI Joe team, and they're actually doing exactly what the GI Joe team said they were going to do because of Psych Out kind of getting a read on them and figuring out how they're going to act. So it's maybe what you would call a minor story, but it's a very memorable one for me. It's actually, I think, one of my favorite special missions issues.
Very nice. Like I said, looking back, I don't recall this one from when I know I picked it up when it came out because I was full force into G.I. Joe and most things comics at this point. So I don't recall this one, but reading, I do enjoy it. Like, a lot of good points. You made a lot of good points when you're talking about it. But yeah, there's a lot of great dialogue. As Larry, Larry's great at the dialogue. He's fantastic, and I love, how the Joes think they're one step ahead of the Russians, and the Russians think they're one step ahead of the Joes. Just the back and forth between the two groups, and the Russians are like, you know what? Well, the Americans are trying to use us, so let's use them to make our getaway. And I really like at the ending of the story. I'm going to jump to the end. When they're talking and the guy that the Russians rescued, he's like, "Yeah, you guys brought along your own shrink to figure out all the moves, and you still got countered at all the key points. At least you got me out one piece. That was the most important thing, right?" And I believe it's Psych Out's like, "No way. The most important thing in any operation is who gets the blame." And then I think it was Falcon's like, "Right now, I don't care about the blame. I just hope that those Russians make it home safe." And they follow from a previous comment earlier when Psych Out was like, asking about his mom. He's like, "In answer to your previous question, Psych Out, I got along with my mother. I got along fine with my mother." So I love how, there's just a random throwaway, how is the situation with you and your mom earlier in the issue? And then they follow up at the very end. It's like, "By the way, we get along fine."
Callbacks like that are always fun. It's always a great way of seeing if the reader is paying attention.
Yes,
it's not just filler. That's funny.
Yeah, no,
as a slight diversion, I've started teaching writing, like adult education classes, and one of the things I hammer on constantly is setups and payoffs. We have a class coming up which is all about setups and payoffs. I don't know if I'm going to bring a Marvel G.I. Joe comic book in to illustrate it, but this is a perfect example of that. You set something up in the first part of the story, the first act, and you pay it off later on, and audiences and viewers and readers like things like that because it kind of justifies you paying attention, and even just justifies you purchasing the project. Purchasing whatever the entertainment is. If you get that call back and you're like, "Oh, okay, I know, I get why that happened."
Well, no, the whole thing, like really to Chekhov's gun, if you introduce a gun, you need to use it at some point.
Yeah.
The wife and I do a Quantum Leap podcast. Well, it's on hold right now just because of life, but we were doing a Quantum Leap podcast, and me and our friend Hayden introduced Michelle to that concept of Chekhov's gun because, things happen one part of the episode, and then later on, it would follow up on where like that's an example of Chekhov's gun. So now whenever Michelle's watching something, she sees that in the show that I'm watching. Oh, there's that gun thing you were talking about. Yes, it is. So I do like when they do that. They make a comment or bring something out, and then again, per Chekhov's law, gun. Yeah, you bring it out.
It's a fun technique for writing, and I would say it's like the cheapest fun thing you can do in any story, which doesn't cost you anything except ink. But if you're thinking of your story in the grand scheme of things, you set something up early on and you pay it off, and the audience absolutely loves. So again, another digression, but I can do that because there's only two of us talking.
Yes, digress away.
My class, we did a full class on the 3-act structure, and we used Titanic, James Cameron's Titanic, as an example of a perfectly constructed screenplay, structurally speaking. And we used, as far as setup and payoff goes, was Jack teaching Rose how to hawk loogies off the railing, which is kind of a funny little moment. You think it just kind of exists in itself. But then later on, when everything's going to hell and Cal grabs her and says, "You're coming with me," and she spits in his face and he lets her go. And I said, that's payoff. That's setting up her learning how to hawk a loogie and paying it off with her spitting in the guy's face. That's how it works. That's the language of storytelling, is you reward the audience for their attention.
Yeah. And it's great when it's an actual part of the plot. Like, you bring in this concept, and like Titanic you were talking about, it's just a throwaway line, we'll have to teach you how to do this, but then actually pays off later on in the movie to help her out. But I also really love it, like in this story here, where that line at the very end doesn't really mean anything by itself. It doesn't really affect the story, but it's just a verbal throwback. And I just love those little things like that.
Well, they're great. They're great character building moments too.
Yes.
After everything that's happened, they swapped clothing with the Russians, and they went off and got in their old airplane. They did all this other stuff, and everything came together at the end. The mission's over. It's like, by the way, I do have a good relationship with my mother. Thanks for asking. It's just one of those things that it's a good character moment. You can imagine them bickering about it all the way back to safe territory.
Yeah, and I say, it builds their character, and it gives a little more depth into who they are, and it shows that they're comic book characters, but Larry makes them seem like real people.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was doing a Suicide Squad podcast, and that's one thing I loved about that is that John Ostrander would take these, these B, C, maybe even Z-rate characters, and he would bring them in the Suicide Squad, and he would make you care about them.
Yeah.
He would kill a lot of them off afterwards, but he would make you care about them, But these low lives that know, these characters show up, get beaten up by Batman or the Flash, whoever, and you don't think about them anymore. Yeah, Larry or John would bring them in and give them depth and emotion and make you care about them. Larry does much the same in his G.I. Joe book, and that's one thing that I may have some problems with some of the things he's done later on in the book, which we'll get to in a decade or so, but down the line, but. Overall, like we always wax Larry's car because Larry did a fantastic job. No matter what crap Hasbro stuck him with, for the most part, Larry was able to take
and they did.
What is that? Making a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to hand it to the guy. And again, we're very much glazing Larry right now, but to be the fact that he's still writing G.I. Joe comics, we're talking like 40. Next year, I think will be the 45th anniversary of the start of the G.I. Joe Real American Hero. So, almost 50 years of writing this book and telling these stories in this certain continuity. And there was a hiatus of about 15 years or so. But, to be sort of associated with something that was essentially a hired gun job.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there were, I'm sure, many times during the writing of Real American Hero where the more Hasbro started introducing weird outlandish characters, where Larry could have said, "You know what, I'm good. I'm going to wrap up this storyline, and then I'm going to say goodbye and let somebody else take over the book." But he stuck with it, I guess. He just there was something about it he probably just enjoyed. And maybe they mailed. I think he said they as per his contract, Hasbro sent him every toy that they made. I mean, I think, oh gosh, you need like a pretty big storage locker for all that stuff, But they obviously you wouldn't do the job if you didn't enjoy it, and That's one thing for a lot of writers and creatives, and it's like, even that job can frustrate you from time to time. If you enjoy doing it on a fundamental level, you kind of stick with it. And plus, I'm sure a pretty decent paycheck as well, if not spectacular. You're not going to get rich. You're not going to get rich writing comics,
right? Well, on the original comics, Larry made, whenever it came up, he was so desperate for work. He's like, he'd even write Barbie if they asked him to. He wanted something to work on. And so, but again, you can tell that he took something that was just a job, just to get him some payday and get him some credit out there. And like you said, he's still working on it 45 years later. So you can tell that no matter how it started out, it very much has turned into a passion project, I would think.
Yeah.
Also, real quick, joining us in the chat, we have one of my buddies from the Energon Protocols, Dave Martell. He says, hello there, of G.I. Joe RPG Stories. Hey, Dave, glad you could join us, man. Unfortunately, you joined us near the end of the show, but glad you could join us, man.
Well, we got more we can talk about. Speaking of setups and payoffs, and speaking of segues,
yes.
I wanted to bring attention to a couple of the things that you'll find only in the actual issue itself. If you're so fortunate as I am to have I like to tell Kevin out there, a near mint condition copy. The spine is perfectly maintained. It has been hermetically sealed in mylar plastic. I didn't roll it up and blow my nose into it and anything like that. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out there. First is on the Bullpen Bulletins page, where they would profile a specific artist or creative on a monthly basis. I'm kind of holding it up. You can't really see it because of the background, but they did a spotlight on Bob Budiansky, who, if you're an 80s kid, he was responsible for probably many of your favorite childhood memories. Specifically, he was the initial writer of the Transformers comic book series. But also, and not a lot of people know this, he was the one who came up with the names of the characters and sort of devised the mythology of the Transformers. For who was it? It was Mattel that did. Who released Transformers? I'm trying to remember. I was never a big Transformers fan. The toys,
wasn't it?
Was it Mattel or Hasbro? I mean, even Hasbro.
Hasbro. I think it's Hasbro. They have it now, so I believe it was Hasbro.
I think it was Hasbro because they bought the rights to the different studios or different toy companies in Japan. Their lines of transforming toys and brought them all over. This is why the original Transformers are all different scales.
Right.
Some of them were trying to transform into household objects like Walter P-38s and little radios, and some of them were just cars and things like that. But it was Bob Budiansky who kind of came up with the mythology of Cybertron and Autobot and Decepticon and a lot of the character names. Maybe not all of them, but I think he came up with Megatron as the head villain, and Optimus Prime as the leader of the Autobots. And the initial run of Transformers comics, which is, as I can recall, was pretty solid. Not quite as good as G.I. Joe, but decent enough, was written by him. So Bob Budiansky is partially responsible for your childhood if you're a fan of Transformers. And anyway, that's the first thing I wanted to point out there.
Very much so.
The second thing comes in the special dispatches, which is, again, just disappeared on the screen. It's the letters column, essentially, for special missions. And a gentleman named Ed Jarrett from Plainfield, Illinois, wrote in a letter talking about special missions episode or issue 7, the old switcheroo, and just talks about some just random stuff, seeing Cobra in action and the October Guard and everything else. But in his penultimate paragraph, he says, I would like to see a limited series or graphic novel of the origin of the Joes. I have collected since the beginning, and I've always wondered how and why the Strike Force was started. And there's a response to his letter from the editor, I guess in this case would be Bob Harris. And he says, if you want in on a little secret, though, plans are already in the works for a Snake Eyes Storm Shadow graphic novel, but don't tell anyone just yet. So we talked about setups and payoffs. That's a setup that did not get a payoff because I remember hearing about that. Well, obviously I read it in this particular issue and I thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool. I wonder who's going to, if Larry's going to write it and if they're going to get a special artist. Like in my wildest dreams, I thought of somebody like Bill Sienkiewicz would have done a really wild Snake Eyes Storm Shadow graphic novel, sort of that prestige format type of thing. And I also remember them talking about they were going to be doing a Snake Eyes graphic novel at some point. I'm not sure what happened. I'm sure if you look it up online, you might get that story. But it's kind of interesting to ask the question is why it never happened. Like if Larry said, I am way too busy to do this, if they didn't want to farm it out to somebody else, maybe, I mean, it's been said that 1987 was kind of the peak year for G.I. Joe comic sales. I think they said 1989 was the best year for toy sales, but I'm almost wondering if they felt, well, you know, we've had a run of a year that had special missions launched, the 50th issue of G.I. Joe. They did the G.I. Joe and Transformers miniseries. They're doing classic G.I. Joe. Just throwing so much G.I. Joe stuff out that they were almost kind of saturating the market. And the thing will happen where you kind of put too much stuff, stack too much stuff on the table and start to bend in the middle. I'm not sure what the story is. Like, it's possible that they rolled it into one of the three-parters. I think there was like another Snake Eyes three-parter that happened in like the 80s or 90s.
It was the 90s.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. Maybe they rolled part of that Snake Eyes story you were talking about into that Snake Eyes or Snake Eyes Rebirth, or whatever it's called.
Yeah. Because I remember that had big flashbacks to Vietnam, and the Baroness and her brother were there, and Storm Shadow was there, and a little bit of retro continuity or retroactive continuity futzing. But it was just kind of interesting to see that was in there, because I remember there was talk of it a couple of times, and they just never really materialized. So whether they didn't have the budget or the means, or they just didn't think there was going to be the readership, or maybe they said, no, just run it into the mainline book, because they also just published their last or close to their last yearbook. I think, in fact, the same month that this came out, I think there was when the final the G.I. Joe yearbook came out.
Yeah, we just talked about.
Oh, I'm looking at the checklist on the bullpen bullet on the checklist. I see G.I. Joe Special Missions number 9. I see Tales of G.I. Joe number 2. I see G.I. Joe yearbook number 4. I see G.I. Joe number 68.
Yep.
So I think they just had, and there's also G.I. Joe Comics magazine, which I guess reprinted some issues in a larger magazine style format. So yeah, I think that may have had something to do with it. It's just too much Joe. This is a thing that a lot of the streaming services are learning, that if you keep saturating the market with sort of mid-grade product, that it kind of has an impact on the overall picture. I'm not going to mention a particular studio or a particular property. Star Wars. But I know that there's that Mandalorian movie coming up that people just do not seem to be very excited in. Although I think it looks like it could be fun. But this is just a thing that entertainment companies do. And there was an analogy I'll drop in. Was I can't remember where I heard it, but someone said that if you have a turkey sandwich every day for lunch, then Thanksgiving becomes a little less special.
Right.
So, it could be just a case of too many turkey sandwiches. And you're like, well, people are going to start losing a taste for these things if we keep flooding the marketplace with them.
And I was just double checking, because I was wondering, the G.I. Joe comic magazine you referred to, that was the digest size.
Okay.
They released like two issues, like it was, in a book, and they did the first 37 episodes, their first 37 issues of the series in a digest format.
Wow. That's a lot for a digest. I
think it was like 2 or 3 issues per
book. Okay, all right. So it wasn't just one digest. No, that would be silly.
No, there was. It was. They did like 2 or 3 issues, and they ran for a while. I in fact, that's, as I talked about before, that's how I read a lot of the earlier issues. Let's do the digests.
Kids today have no appreciation for how hard it was to get your hands on back issues. Like you didn't have eBay. You literally had to go to a comic book shop and go through their back issue bin to see if there was anything you didn't have. I used to do that when I first started collecting G.I. Joe comics. I started with issue 28. That was the first one I bought new on the stand. And I had to go back and had to track down the preceding 27 issues, and that led me to start going to comic book shops and just say, okay, need it, got it, and figuring out how much money I had from my part-time job, and like, okay, I'm going to take these books home and read them and fill in the gaps.
As I've talked about, I started with issue 58, and that's what got me into comic books in general. Was I'd picked up 58 off the newsstand, and I found comic book shops at some point thereafter, and I started going looking for the back issues. And as I'm there, I'm like, what's on the shelf? Oh, what's this with Spider-Man? What's this with Batman? What this? I slowly started picking everything up. So, that's looking for back issues is what got me into the comic book shop, and which led me to having, 30 some odd long boxes of, comics in my, in my garage right now.
I mean, I'm sure I'm going to sound like old man yells at cloud, the Abe Simpson meme right now, but I mean, it's just different. My kid asks me all the time. He says, what was it like when you were my age? What was it like when you were growing up? I say, it was the same, but it was different. I think things were a little harder to come by. Yep. If you wanted to see a movie, you had to go to the theater to see it. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to watch it at home, you had to wait for it to come home video, and you had to go rent it and take it home and watch it on these big bulky machines called video cassette recorders and players. And it was just a different time. And there's one thing I do definitely miss, which is kind of like the thrill of the hunt of finding things in the wild, because so many things now, it's just I can just click a button. And there it is, like a couple of months, like last month, Easter, earlier this month, Easter. If you're a fan of the band U2, which I am, still after all these years, they released a surprise EP on Good Friday. It's called Easter Lily, and I was quite literally in the morning, get up, check my email. There's an email from them saying we have a new EP out. It's called Easter Lily. You can download it here. I'm like, oh, okay, click. There it was. That morning, I woke up not expecting to hear a new U2 EP, but I did. Just like, okay, there it is. Boom. Whereas before it would be, they have to have like this big lead-in time to doing it and everything. So there's things like that, but at the same time, you kind of miss finding these things out there, like going into a new comic book store for the bins and finding that one thing you've been looking for. It does not happen as often.
Well, it's like my 11-year-old. Yeah, he'll talk about the internet. I'm like, when I was your age, son, I didn't have the internet. What? You didn't? Yeah, no, I didn't have. We didn't have that when I was your age, son. Movies. You want to watch this movie? I've got it on my Plex server. When I was a kid, if I wanted this TV show or movie or whatever, like you said, I had to, for TV show, I had to wait for it to come on. When it came on, I had to watch it right then. Now if the show's on, I want you to do so. You can pause your show, come take care of dishes, whatever, go back to it. When I was a kid, I'm watching the show. Mom's like, Aaron, I need you to do that. Well, hang on. I'm in the middle of the show. Hang on, Mom.
No, Night Rider's on.
Yeah.
Night Rider's on.
I couldn't pause it to do something.
Wait for the commercial. Did you take out the garbage? Mom, I'm watching 18. Take out the garbage. When did the next commercial break? And then commercials, boom, you run and grab your sneakers. Yeah, run the garbage can down to the curb, come back in time to find out, how they managed to escape from the prison with a roll of duct tape and a paper clip, and a box of Kleenex.
Well, Dave Martell said he started collecting them in '98. Like, how do you track them down?
I'm sure with a great degree of difficulty. But I mean, at the same time, gosh, this is like a walk down memory lane. A bunch of old guys talking about stuff. I think 98, 99 was around the time that eBay started up, as I recall. Because I remember two things of 1999. Number one, I started working from home as a full-time writer. So I had lots of money, income coming in and low expenses because life was still affordable back then. Right. And I discovered eBay and I was like, oh my God, I can get these rare books and these comics and, these laser discs, because this is a long time ago, and, some early DVDs. I was like, I can get all these things now. And I just have to order it and I just have to pay for it online and then somebody will send it to me and I have to go searching for it. But at the same time, something in that era was still kind of, you would have to go out to find those things. When the new Metallica album or whatever dropped, you go to the record store that day and they have the big display with all the copies of the Black Album there, and you pick it up in your format of choice, whether it was LP, cassette, or a CD, and you'd pay for it with cash and you'd go pop it into the tape deck of your car.
Nowadays, you can pre-order a month ahead of time, and build your house.
yeah. Oh, we got another letter. Yeah. Joe Jackson says he started collecting in '87. Sounds so old. Yes, Joseph, you do sound old. I started in '84. '84 was my first kickoff for, which is carry the one. That's a long time. Yeah, it's been a long time. I've been reading comics and collecting comics a long time.
Well, it sounds like me and Joe started around the same time. That's about the same time I started. So yeah.
I mean, I may have technically started earlier, but not as a collector. Just occasionally somebody would get me a comic. I still have all my old Marvel would do the big giant size books. I have my original Marvel giant size Star Wars adaptation from Howard Chaykin, and I have the Battlestar Galactica adaptation of the I guess it was the movie. And I have Buck Rogers, and I have a black hole and Alien, and yeah.
He's came out a bit later,
Origins.
but
yeah,
he's came out a bit later, but yeah.
And I got a whole stack of them in the other room, because when I do an episode of Celluloid Heroes, if there's a movie that's got a novelization or a comic book adaptation, like I have to pull all the material together and go through it just to kind of see what kind of stuff was there. So to kind of immerse myself in it. But I had comics before that point, but it was G.I. Joe that actually kind of got me to start buying them on the regular. And then after that, it was all over. My crates of long boxes and everything else is taking up space here. I got to figure what I'm going to do with them. But that's that's part of the fun. The things we leave behind, but the things we collect as well. So
Dave Martell, he says he had to dive into bins at used bookstores. Still missing many.
It's funny because these you never think these things would become preciously sought. They're just kind of viewed as somewhat disposable. Like my legendary movie novelization collection, which has been the butt of some jokes. I've got about 250 of them, and these things were just meant to be read and then just tossed to the used bookstore or just forgotten about. But because there was such a limited number of them made and they're hard to come by, then all of a sudden they've become collectible. So
very much so.
So people, don't throw your junk out. Hang on to it. It'll be valuable. Just tell your wife or significant other that it's worth money, and they'll let you hang on to it. At least that's what I tell my wife. I say, as long as it gets more valuable as the years go by. We were talking about G.I. Joe.
We were. Then we digressed into our into our youth, and
this is the thing that happens when you get old. When you get older,
yes.
and you start.
No, I preach to the choir. I'm older than you are, so yes, you're definitely preaching to the choir, my friend. And you wanted to talk about the letters column?
I think I just did. I talked about the guy who was asking me about the 20 minutes ago when we were talking about the
we got sides,
the Snake Eyes Storm Shadow graphic novel.
That's what it was, yes.
They never came out.
Yes. So I'll have to maybe get Jared next time he goes to a con and sees Larry. Maybe he can ask Larry if Larry knows about either of those graphic novels and what happened to them, why they didn't come out as graphic novels.
Can I make a request?
You can make anything you want.
Because I know Larry listens to your show, Aaron. Larry, write an autobiography.
There you go.
Write an autobiography. We will all buy it. I think everybody would love to hear your stories, both as a veteran, but also as a man making his way through the entertainment industry as an actor and a bit player, and then how you got the job for writing G.I. Joe, and just how the fandom and how writing G.I. Joe has kind of affected or just had an impact on your life, like it's had an impact on all our lives. Because I know you've got great stories out there that you probably haven't told people, and I think we would all love to hear them. So, and
even if he's told people, not everyone's heard all those stories. So I would definitely. Well, like I guess from a few episodes ago on the main show, Flint Dilley, he did this Game Master book, which kind of is his memoirs of growing up and his work on Transformers and his stuff he worked with the D&D stuff and hung out with Gary Garawak and all them. Yeah. And his Game Master book kind of covers that. So I would love to see Larry do something like that. Yeah, that would definitely be fantastic. I would definitely buy it.
Me too.
And Dave Martell says that he only had one in 1986, issue 47. The kid living next door to the convenience store always grabbed the only copy the village had. Well, save for that one. I guess their little village only got one issue of each comic, and this kid down the street would go over and buy it before Dave got there.
But not that month. Not that month.
They beat him to the punch.
It was Dave with a ski mask and a lead pipe waiting around the corner. It was whack right into the kneecaps. The kid drops the book, snatches it, and runs away. Not this time, kid. And that's a good issue. That's a good issue. As soon as you just wrote issue 47, like, I know the cover. It's the devilfish. It's Beachhead, wetsuit, and hawk. Fists raised, firing, and explosions around. That's an outstanding issue. So if you only had to get one issue of G.I. Joe in that particular year, that would be the one to get. Yeah. I'm not sure if 43 came out that year or that was the previous year. It was previous.
Okay.
But yeah. If you only got one issue of G.I. Joe in 1985, 43 was the one to get.
Yeah. Most definitely. But I think we've gone from G.I. Joe to everything else. So unless there's anything else you want to talk about, Brad, or our guests out there.
Well, let me think as I stroke my chin beard thoughtfully. No, I think we've covered about everything, including the issue. At least we talked about the issue.
Yes,
we didn't go out on these wildly long. Is that what happens when it's just you and me on the show? Is it we just go on these wild tangents. We forget we're recording.
I think it happens. It happens with everybody I talk to. We get talk about these tangents, and again, I guess a good host would, well, let's go back to the topic and talk about this. I'm like, I enjoy these. I enjoy these tangents and these digressions.
Well,
and
I'm looking at the clock. We just rolled over to the 1 hour mark. I was determined to give listeners of Bravo Team their money's worth, their ears worth. At least you give them a good hour of entertainment.
Yes. And back to G.I. Joe comics. Dave says, imagine thinking from 1986 to 1988, 98, the Storm Shadow died in the comics.
You know what? Yeah. I mean, if you never got a chance to read another one, you think, or if you got that issue and then you had one of those accidents that always happen on 80s TV where you fell into a coma and then you woke up like 5 years later and you're like, oh, what? But I thought Storm Shadow was dead. He was killed by the bear. And they were like, no. He was resurrected when they created the Cobra Emperor Serpentor. And then you fall back into a coma because that's just too much for you to handle. Yeah, I'm going to go back to sleep. Things have gotten too weird.
Paul Morales says, hello, everybody. Hey, Paul, glad you could join us, man.
Good timing, Paul. You arrived just as we're winding things up.
And talking about waking up from a coma and finding Serpentor.
It's falling back. And then being revived, like, okay, let me go into my local convenience store. I could read a G.I. Joe comic, and you pull it when it's got Raptor on the cover, and you put it back in, you fall back over, and you hit your head, and it's back to nighty-night time.
I'd make some other comments, but I don't want to piss off certain people, so we're going to go ahead and skip those. Anyway, so, Brad, unless you have other thoughts that we haven't covered, Robbie, we've covered almost everything we can under the sun at this point, so where can people find you if they want to hear more from you?
Well, my goodness, after the hour that's been, I'm not sure anybody else wants to hear any more from me. But as always, you'll find me over at the Long Box Crusade as host and creator of the Celluloid Heroes podcast, which is my deep dive look at the cinema of Gen X, framed through my own personal experiences of seeing these key 50 or so movies in the theater for the very first time. We just released a week ago our latest episode, which is a look at John Milius's 1984 film Red Dawn, the story of the Band of Freedom Fighters. Ironically, not too dissimilar from the ones in this issue of G.I. Joe, only our kids call themselves the Wolverines. And it's a great little film, I gotta say. It's always been one of my favorites. Not so much because it's supposedly a rah, let's go kill those commies who are invading our heartland town. A much deeper, much smarter, much more adult movie than I think people were expecting, because it deals with a lot of issues of trauma and war and what it means to be occupied and what it means to fight back, and how it's not just this heroic Hollywood style story, that there's a great amount of loss, a great amount of just horrible things that happen. And I think that the people who saw Red Dawn prepared to kind of tear it down a notch went, well, that's actually a pretty adult way of looking at things. And that was kind of my experience seeing it at age 11, which is, we thought it was going to be like a Chuck Norris movie, only with Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen. And it ended up being something completely different. But there was a very amusing story about how we missed the first 15 or 5 minutes or so of Red Dawn because my friend's mother was driving us to the theater and the car actually ran out of gas. So we had to run to the gas station to get a can with an empty gas can to come back, put $5 of gas into the car and get to the theater. And we got there just as the town was being attacked. So it wasn't until the movie came out on video the following year that I was able to rent it and watch the first little bit, which we really hadn't missed much of anything. So, but you'll find me there. And you can connect with me at the handle on Instagram is at the Celluloid Heroes Pod. And that's where I usually post the notes and updates and, preview what episode's coming next. So definitely check it out. And I forgot to mention top of the show, and mention it now. This episode is sponsored by Big Danny Cool and Sean Adams over on our Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, if you like what we're doing here, go ahead and definitely check that out. I've got a QR code I've set up for it. Where's that? Hopefully it works right. Again, new system and everything. It's at patreon.com/headcastnetwork. Definitely check out the Patreon. And if you like what we're doing here, we've got my website, which is headcast.headspeaks.com. Again, there's a QR code for that.
Again, I'm playing new things. This is a new system, as I said, I'm trying out. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet for next month. I'm going to stick with this, or if I'm going to, like I say, I'm also maybe looking at a couple different options. So I'm still debating what I'm doing, where I'm going to spend my money at, because right now this is a free version I'm using to test it. So people that's normally watching the show, let me know how this turned out compared to the other shows that you normally watch on here. Before I talk any further, Joe Jackson does say, great show, guys. Thank you, Joe. Again, definitely Joe and Hines, you guys ever want to appear on the show, definitely reach out to me. Would definitely love to have you guys on. But more about me. Like I said, you go to headcast.headspeaks.com. I'm also on Facebook. I've got facebook.com/group/gijoe, and that's where I do most of my stuff at. I'm also on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, everything else, either at G.I. Joe Headcast or Headspeaks or Headcast Network. You can find me on one of those three. Different places are doing different things. Again, I'm a computer guy. I did tech support for 12 years for an internet company, but I'm horrible at social media. I don't post on Twitter and Blue Sky and Instagram as much as I should. The main thing I hang out is Facebook because it's there.
You're still better than I am. You're still better than I am. I'm so terrible. I'm so terrible at social media. And my wife's a publicist, and she's like a social media dynamo. Right. I will say, let me just jump in. I do have a Facebook page, a Facebook creator author page. That's my wife running it. Occasionally she'll say, "Oh, somebody messaged your Facebook page. Do you want to hop onto my computer because you're an incompetent idiot if it comes to social media and respond to their email or their message?" Yes, I'll go on and tap away in response, and then
I'll tag you.
I go back. Well, then I go back to forgetting I have a Facebook page.
Yeah, when I'm tagging things for the show on Facebook, I'll tag you in a lot of times, especially if you're on it, and I'll tag your. So some of that may be me tagging you.
It usually is. It's either you or it's Pat Sampson who's tagging me on something. Although, spoiler alert, we're having a conversation. I was invited to be on the Sherlock Holmes podcast that Jared and Kathy Bright run, and Jared made a crack about me not having a cell phone. I said, "Oh, Brian doesn't even have a cell phone." And Kathy couldn't believe it. And I told her, I say, "This is true." I said, "I have a landline and I have a fax machine, and I am not joking in either regard." I am certainly reachable. I have a very nice iPad Pro that I do a lot of my online stuff. So if people are messaging me or whatever, I use that. But I still have a fax machine and I still have a landline. I used to have a cell phone. The problem was people kept calling me on the thing. I could never get a moment to myself.
Again, going back to our youth, that's if you want to get away from things, you leave your house and people can't contact you.
Yeah.
Nowadays, no matter where you're at, well, except for you, because, you're avoiding technology, apparently. My wife wants me, the kids need me, they've always got a way to contact me on my phone. So,
yeah. Well, I tell people, you fax me or you send me an email or you leave me a voicemail, I will get back to you. There's one thing I will claim, say I'm terrible with technology and cell phones and stuff like that. But if a person reaches out to me with a legitimate question or comment or whatever, I will get back to them, and I will get back to them as soon as I can. You will have, if you send me a message after like 6:00 on a Tuesday, you'll have a response by 8 a.m. Wednesday. I will diligently get back to you on that. So, that's half joking, but it's actually the truth. I don't really vibe. There's a personal reason for it I won't really get into, but you being a father yourself and having a son who's about the age of my son, there was a point where I realized, when I had a phone that yes, there's things on the phone to distract me and everything. When I'm in the park or the playground and pushing my kid in the swing, the little toddler swing, and like the really important stuff in my life is right in front of me here in the real world. It's not on this thing. So
very nice.
So I just kind of made a decision to sort of step away, and now he's asking for a cell phone. So it's like the circle of life just kind of swirls around and everything.
What a good father you are.
You'll get a flip phone and you'll be happy with it. Not getting any of these apps or anything else like that. And your pals will make fun of you for having some archaic old thing that you can't send memes and stuff like that. But you'll be better for it, son. And he's fine with it. Because he has no choice because he's a minor. So
there you go. On the podcasting front, pet things on hold for this month, probably this next month. Life's been a little busy. I've got an 18-year-old that's graduating from high school this year. So I've been busy doing things with that one, getting things situated and finishing up their band stuff. So I should have everything running back by the beginning of June. But We're still doing these shows. Again, the 4th Sunday of the month. Next month, May, we should be here on the 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific time, looking at probably the next issue of G.I. Joe. I think it's issue 80? No, 70. Issue 70 of G.I. Joe. So join us there. And we'll also be looking at the first episode of the second season of the cartoon. We finished up the first season. So now we're moving on to the second season with the 5-part episode, Arise, Spencer, Arise. And we'll be having those, an episode, break that into 5 episodes like it aired originally. And we'll look at each episode as it comes out. So definitely join us next month when we look at those. And I think that's going to do it. I talked about my podcast. I put for next episode. And again, at some point, once my life calms down a little bit, I plan on getting a second showing out so we can cover Bravo Team or Special Missions and the book in the same month. So instead of getting behind. So that's coming soon. So I'll be either a Saturday or a Sunday. I will be doing a second YouTube showing. So keep watching for that. But that's going to do it for this month. Until next time, remember, knowing is half the battle.
Yo, Joe.
And then we get Joe in the chat with his Cobra.
Thank you for listening to Bravo Team, a supplementary G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast show. Be sure to check out our main show, the second Tuesday of the month, G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, where I talk about the G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero comic book series read by Larry Hama and the G.I. Joe cartoon from the 80s. Be sure to like us on Facebook, check out our Facebook page. Just search for G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, under both Facebook and over on Twitter. We're also over on Google+. Be sure to rate us and to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And be sure to write in and let us know how we're doing. We love hearing from fans. You can write to us at bravoteam@headspeaks.com. You can also send an MP3 file in and we'll play that on the air. You can send that to bravoteam@headspeaks.com. And be sure to check out my other great shows on the Headcast Network, Head Speaks, Task Force X, and the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, plus possibly more in the future. Also be sure to check out the podcasts of my co-hosts. They have some great shows. And if you want to appear on this show, definitely let me know. I'm always up to speaking to new people. You can send me a Facebook message or you can send us an email to bravoteam@headspeaks.com. Be sure to check out our website. The main site is at headspeaks.com, but you can check out the website for this show at gijoe.headspeaks.com. Be sure to join us here monthly for another great podcast. Until next time, Joe's dismissed.